Tell me
All right, cool.
where to look, what to say.
You can just look toward. Oh, got this thing. Come on. There you go. All right, yeah, just like normal conversation. Can you please introduce yourself? And obviously, you and I know each other pretty well, but you know what you do, and job title and all that good stuff.
Okay. So my name is Rebecca Price, and I know Cole from semesters of teaching classes in the fitness certificate program over at Middleton College. I have two roles, and then the role that Cole and I are talking about is I'm actually a group exercise instructor. I'm a trainer and a coach, primarily at the Princeton Club. And in Madison, the Princeton Club has 7 different locations, and I primarily work on the east side. So I work for the Big Box Club, as they call it, Princeton Club East. And then there's a couple of small pocket express clubs where I personal train at.
Yeah. Cool. So, Rebecca, first off, I'm going to ask you, how did you get into the fitness industry?
That's actually kind of a funny story. I am a former collegiate swimmer, so I swam at the University of North Dakota. They have water that is not frozen there. People get that confused. But as part of when I went to grad school in lacrosse. And I was coaching swim team, I was lifeguarding, and the health and fitness person said they needed someone to teach water aerobics. And because I knew how to swim, I could teach water aerobics.
Right.
It's so much the same thing. And if you were a swimmer, you had such not pleasant names for the ladies that came in and did water exercise, because usually they just flapped their mouth and really didn't do anything else. But that's how it started, and it kind of evolved. So I got my start at Lacrosse Y.
Yeah.
They didn't really train me to teach group X or that, but they started with like, here you go, teach the water-based class, go. So it was a complete learning experience. But then over the years there, they were one of the first places to have spinning. So I was able to get my spin certification, my kickboxing certification, all of that, and it just blossomed and grew from there.
Cool. All right, so question number 2. What did you do at work on a typical day, and what are your responsibilities, fitness-wise?
Fitness-wise, typical day. Usually I'm teaching mostly group exercise. So if you really think about it, we can only teach a couple of those classes a day. Yeah. It's pretty hard on your system to teach too many. And lots of times we don't teach the entire class. We are helping people, we're going through the class. So teaching that, but you have to prep for the class. So oftentimes you are planning what you're going to do for the class well ahead of time. You're getting there early, making sure everything's set up. You have to clean up afterwards, interact with a lot of the participants. And a lot of them are just asking you about your general life, and you end up talking to them and doing all of that good stuff. When I'm training and I'm coaching, it does take a bit to really write workouts, think about what the end goals are, and have something that consecutively meshes. And really for the last couple of years, I was taking just a bigger role in doing a lot of the training programs. So you might have to prepare advertising or doing a lot of Facebook posts. I'm not so good about using my Twitter account, but Facebook posts, because people would be, what are you teaching? Where are you at tonight? What's going on? Especially with my groups too. I always did weekly emails with all the training groups that I have, just to remind them, here's what we did, here's what's coming up, here's basically your homework for the week before we meet the next time. So a lot of that people don't always think about, you do a lot of prep work outside the actual meeting time. Yeah.
And then what do you like most about your job?
I love the people. I love interacting with the people, and I love when they meet their goal. For example, I did some personal training with a woman in her 70s, and her goal was to be able to hike the Grand Canyon this fall. So last week she sent me an email. She successfully hiked down, hiked out, didn't have pain, was able to do it. She was really worried about being able to keep up with her kids. And be able to do this. So for me, that was so awesome. So we had our training program. She was doing all the hard work, but I just had to check in with her, encourage her, give her a few pointers, and she met her goal. And that's what I love. It's just seeing people. I love working with beginners because they're just so much more appreciative of meeting their goals. Don't get me wrong. I've worked with a lot of Ironman athletes, but they're not as appreciative anymore about the small things. And lots of times you have to remember the small things because they end up being the big things.
Yeah, that's impressive too, especially for a woman her age.
It is, and she did great with it. So I end up working lots of times with beginner athletes as well as some of our older adults, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me. Like some people I know want to have that high caliber athlete. Yeah. And I can work with them. I have worked with them. I just appreciate all the little steps and all the small accomplishments because it makes people feel really good about themselves.
Yeah. So, What would you say your work environment is like? I mean, obviously it's in a gym setting, but can you speak a little bit to
Oh my gosh.
what it's
So
like?
a gym is a gym. You've got people who are sweaty, gross, hardly
Yeah.
wearing any clothing. Then you end up going to the grocery store and you see somebody not in your workout clothes and they're like, oh, this is what you look like with clothes
Yeah.
on. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, please don't tell me I know anyone standing around me that you just said that in the checkout line. And especially with the older ladies that I taught water aerobics to, they're like, oh, you do, wear clothes. I'm like, oh.
No filter at all.
Right. But that environment is always an interesting environment because you have a little bit of everything. And you have to be able to, you will see all things. And I always tell people, especially the ones who have taken my classes over at Madison College, they will think of you as their therapist, their financial planner, their problem solver, you name it. They will tell you things you never wanted to know about. It's pretty typical. And then you meet a lot of these people in the locker room while you're trying to shower or change, and they have to ask you 55 questions about their workout, and you're like, I just want to go to the bathroom, or I want to go to the shower. And you kind of have to go from there. So I think it's a really interesting environment. Every day is a new day.
Yeah. So what kind of formal education do you recommend for this?
Well, one, I think you don't ever stop learning in this industry because things change. There are new trends. There's new research. Things change. You have to stay on top of it. Formal education-wise, you got to understand anatomy. You really do. And honestly, you can have just about any degree. As long as you've really learned about the anatomy, if you've done some things that teach you how to interact with people, that is going to be a huge component to this job. You have to be able to interact with all different types of people. So that is really important. Yes, I would love if you had an exercise science degree. I have a therapeutic recreation degree, but we had to go through the anatomy. We had to know how to work with different populations, how to interview somebody in the sense of trying to bring things out from them so that they can figure out what goals they have and where they want to go with it. But you can't stop learning in this industry. You have to keep on top of things to make sure you understand what's good and what's not good, because there's definitely trends that we have seen that are not safe. They're not healthy in the long run. So you have to be able to discern what's good and what's not so good.
What would you say, obviously we kind of spoke to this earlier, but what would you say is the most rewarding aspect?
Definitely seeing people reach their goals.
Yeah.
And then when they are just so happy. I just finished coaching a group at Madison College. We had a Couch to 5K program. Yesterday was our race. I don't know who schedules a race for the morning after Halloween. It was a little rough for lots of people for that training group. However, it was the first 5K for several of them. And to see how happy they were when they crossed the finish line, that they did it. They actually did it. 9 weeks ago, many of them had never run a lick in their life. And now they've managed to run a majority of a 5K. They were just happy. That was the best part of it. And, thank you. I'm like, well, I didn't do the work. You did the work. So I just kind of helped you along the way to kind of keep you on track.
And then this one's kind of a broader question, but I know in some states it's more fit than others. Obviously, like not California. Colorado is probably the fittest state. But can you speak a little bit to the fitness industry in Wisconsin as opposed to others and what you think where we're going at this point?
Well, we're in the Midwest, so we have 4 seasons. And I think sometimes with certain times of the year, you'll see it. I've worked at a variety of places between Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin. I've been in Minnesota. We have 4 seasons, so we definitely ebb and flow. During the summer outdoor, people are being really active, and sometimes during that winter month when it's really cold and snowy and icy, people don't want to go out as much. We don't see them being sometimes as active as we need them to be. So you definitely have those seasons, whereas if you were in Florida, you were in California, where you're able to be outside more and just get around a little bit better. And I don't even think it's being able to be outside, but lots of times people just don't want to drive or get themselves somewhere during the winter or
go into hibernation mode a little bit.
They do with that. But I think, here, I think living in Madison is kind of a different pretext because I've also lived in other places. Madison tends to be a little bit more We know there's a correlation between a level of education and fitness. We have a highly educated community in this Madison area because of the university and everything else. So I think there's a different perspective as well. We also host a major Ironman. We have 2,500 competitors. So people realize the importance of health and wellness and fitness. I've worked elsewhere in Wisconsin. Yes, they have some of it, but not to the same extent. Outside of the state, it really depends on what the values are, and we know that some states are more fit than others. But that's a cultural, and we've talked about that cultural identity that influences, but education highly influences. So does socioeconomic status in terms of participation in some of this as well. And we're in a little bit more affluent area in that sense of it in the Madison area because it's a little bit more educated. We have a lot of colleges and universities, a little bit different, so it skews it, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And last one, just any advice you'd give to someone preparing for a career in this field?
You have to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to, you're going to make some mistakes. I mean, I made plenty of them. I still make mistakes. I just hope you don't figure out that I made a mistake and then I can keep going. You have to understand that you're also not going to please everybody because you're just not, because they may not like your music. They may not like your word choice. You're just not going to please everybody. You're going to have a lot of successes with it, but you have to be willing to keep learning. You have to be flexible because it will not go as planned. Sometimes you get through your whole agenda, you get through your whole plan. Sometimes you don't, and you have to be willing to adapt, or somebody's just not getting it, or it's just not working for them, or they come in with an injury. Be willing to go take other people's classes. Be willing to go watch other trainers. Be willing to do a lot of reading, prep time outside of class, because that's how you're gonna get good. That's just how it's gonna happen. And then people are gonna want to come to you and they'll ask you advice, or they'll say, can I shadow you? Can I work with you? Because you're willing to do that. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I learn from new people in the field. I learn from veteran instructors because everybody has different styles and methods, and that's the best part of it. So I'll be like, ooh, that's a good line. Ooh, that was a really good exercise. Why didn't I think of that? So you just have to understand that and be willing. And it's, so many people look at it as like a big competition. Like, well, I can't share that with you because you're going to steal it. Well, but I'm going to make it my own, honestly. And that's what you have to do, is you have to see all that so you can make it your own and you can become really diverse. Because that's what it's all about. You have to appeal to the most people that you can. Right.
In order to get the client base,
Right. And, and understand, like, if you do your job well, sometimes your clients don't need you anymore. Right? So, like, you have to be okay with that sometimes they're going to move on, or they might have to go work with somebody else because you've worked with them for a couple of years and now they need a different challenge, or they need a different perspective, or, now they've graduated and they might be back to see you in a little bit, but you also have to be okay with that too.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Rebecca, very much for letting me interview you.